Thank you for joining us for this look at some of the best stories from KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Coming up, it's a big goal that's a long way from being reached. KPBS investigates the slow start for a city fund seeking private donations to help with the homeless crisis. Oceanside is making moves to improve the sand on its beaches, an update on their efforts to deal with erosion. And for more than a month, mental health workers at Kaiser Permanente have been on strike. Hear from patients who are trying to navigate changes to their care. And we start with a reality check for the city of San Diego's finances. Last month's election results mean there will be a lot less money coming in than the mayor hoped. And this week he announced some immediate steps to deal with what lies ahead. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen has more on the cost-cutting measures.
Gloria had hoped city voters would approve Measure E, a sales tax increase that would have turned the city's deficit into a surplus. But it failed by just 3,500 votes. Now, cuts to city services are on the horizon. In addition to a freeze on non-essential hiring and overtime, Gloria says he wants to renegotiate leases of office buildings used by city workers and monetize city facilities like Golden Hall and the adjacent parking garage. Large infrastructure projects like new parks, libraries, and fire stations will also be put on hold.
My goal in this endeavor is to avoid a series of deep cuts in successive budget years and instead right-size our city services to the resources that we have without the expectation of increased revenue.
The city expects a shortfall of $258 million in the next fiscal year, which begins in July. That's 50% greater than the deficit the city had to close in the current fiscal year. The main reasons are inflation, driving up the cost of city operations, and a long history of using one-time resources to help paper over past deficits. City Council member Joe LaCava says San Diego has simply run out of those budget tricks and has to face reality.
We must cut expenses, and some of those cuts will be deep, very deep. But it is an opportunity to right-size government. The mayor proposes solving the deficit in 1 year, and I know my council colleagues will take that proposal very, very seriously.
The City Council's Budget Committee is due to discuss the cost-saving measures next week. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
And we have more on the city's finances, specifically on a goal to tackle homelessness. The city has been trying to solicit donations to pay for shelter, housing, and safety net programs. But KPBS investigative reporter Scott Rod says the city has fallen far short of its fundraising goal and little money has been spent.
Mayor Todd Gloria chose his State of the City address in January to unveil a bold new effort to solve homelessness.
Tonight, I'm announcing a philanthropic campaign to help the city carry out our ambitious plans to end our homelessness crisis. Called San Diegans Together Tackling Homelessness, this campaign already has commitments for $250,000.
The city aimed to raise $370 million in donations this year from philanthropic organizations, private businesses, and average residents. The money would go towards preventing homelessness, expanding shelters, and building an affordable housing high-rise downtown. But San Diegans Together Tackling Homelessness has so far raised just over $1 million, a tiny fraction of its target for the year. Its only expenditure was a few $1,000s on T-shirts for a volunteer event. Experts and advocates who focus on homelessness response and prevention are unimpressed with the initiative.
It is a worthy aspiration, but not terribly practical and probably not achievable.
Rick Gentry is the former CEO of the San Diego Housing Commission. The public agency works to expand affordable housing and address homelessness.
I think there's a great need for planning, coordination, focus, and partnership, and maybe starting with the latter first. You don't just set out a goal and expect people to follow you.
So far, the city hasn't followed through on key commitments. A 10-member advisory board that's supposed to help run the initiative is only half filled and has yet to hold a meeting. The city also said it would post updates online about the initiative's fundraising and spending, but that information is nowhere to be found.
It's bad governance. there's a real issue with the lack of transparency.
Jesse Schmitty is the state policy manager with the advocacy group Alliance San Diego. He's skeptical of the city's plan and says nonprofits and residents already do a lot of work in this space. He argues they shouldn't have to shoulder more of the burden.
This is an issue that needs to be dealt with and addressed by our government.
Mayor Todd Gloria declined multiple interview requests through a spokesperson. San Diego Chief Operating Officer Eric Dargan is overseeing the initiative for the city. He downplayed the criticisms.
I don't consider it falling short. I just consider it an opportunity for anybody that wants to get on the bandwagon. There's no time frame. There's no deadline. This is just us as a community of people working together, asking ourselves, what can we do with what we have?
That said, Dargan initially hoped more people would donate to San Diegans Together Tackling Homelessness.
You'd be amazed how many people in this city are not doing anything.
Dargan says the initiative is looking into funding prevention efforts and assisting college students facing housing instability. But it's made only one expenditure to date, purchasing T-shirts for a volunteer cleanup event downtown.
Doing $2,400 on cleanups to get volunteers to come and be active downtown and understand where a lot of trash is coming from, which is coming from the homeless community. That's a small effort and not anything major.
Dargan says the city still stands behind the initiative, despite the limited impact. But he offered a more modest measure of success than the original goal of resolving homelessness.
If we're able to assist one person, then this initiative is a success.
So the city will continue this donation-based effort to address homelessness. But should it?
No, I don't think that this sounds like a very successful initiative.
Jennifer Mosley is a professor at the University of Chicago who studies the intersection of nonprofits, philanthropy, government, and homelessness. She says the city misjudged how philanthropy works and that it hasn't done enough to inspire confidence in potential donors.
I think that the proof is already there in terms of the low amount of money that they've raised, the low amount of money they've given out, and the fact that they don't seem to have built any infrastructure around it.
Mosley says the city should focus its efforts instead on supporting established charities and working more closely with the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. Scott Rodd, KPBS News.
And that story by Scott Rodd is an example of the work done by our investigative team. More stories are available at the KPBS YouTube page. And you can also get regular updates by email. Just sign up for our newsletters at kpbs.org. There are more than 40,000 foreign nationals serving in our military, and most of them are just one mistake away from being deported. KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis spoke to veterans who want to make it easier for foreign-born soldiers to become American citizens.
Last month, KPBS spoke with a group of conservative men, mostly veterans, about immigration reform. They didn't mince words.
The bottom line is there were guys that were serving our country, keeping me alive, keeping my fellow brothers alive, and that's why I'm here today.
Robert Blessing is a retired Army chaplain. He's talking about non-citizen soldiers who have become deported veterans. Right now, there are roughly 40,000 non-citizens serving in the armed forces. Those who do not finish the naturalization process and get in trouble with the law risk being deported.
This is outrageous. They fought for us. They swore to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign, domestic. They get in trouble after that, and we kick them out. I haven't found anybody who says that's a good idea.
This is personal for Blessing. He visits deported veterans in Tijuana. And once, he performed a naturalization ceremony during a deployment in Iraq.
And it was a wonderful experience to say, welcome to America while you're serving our country in a combat zone.
No one would confuse these guys for liberals. They say explicitly that they're not woke, they're not open borders, they're not pro-amnesty. They believe immigrants who committed violent crimes should be deported. Jim Sprout is a civilian who recently joined the deported veterans movement.
Yeah, there are people that have been deported that I'm glad are deported. But this is a select group. This is people that served this country. They didn't do any heinous crimes.
It hasn't taken long for him to become an outspoken advocate.
I have to say I was appalled when I heard about this. So much so that I'm very glad to be here, very glad to bring this out into the open.
And if Sprout is the movement's new recruit, Robert Vivar is the battle-tested veteran. He's with the group United U.S. Deported Veterans Resource Center.
The deportation of veterans is worldwide. We have deported veterans to over 40 countries around the world.
Vivar says that most veterans are deported after committing a criminal offense, like drunk driving, drug possession, having an unregistered firearm, or domestic violence.
You know, there's no secret, there's no denying veterans get into trouble. Why? Because, you know, they find it very difficult to re-enter civilian life.
He is lobbying for a proposed federal law called the Veterans Service and Recognition Act. It creates an expedited pathway for any service member to complete their citizenship process by the time they finish basic training. The bill also calls for a committee to review cases of deported veterans to see if they should be allowed back in the U.S. Vivar says it's been a challenge to get conservatives to support the bill.
The problem that we're hearing, and we've been hearing for a long time, is that they try to correlate it with an immigration issue. And that's where I think the whole subject gets blown out of proportion.
Instead of looking at it as an immigration issue, he says it should be viewed as a Veterans Affairs issue. And other veterans who have served with non-citizen soldiers agree.
For me, it's a very personal issue. I worked alongside those guys and gals. And
Andy Waters is a retired U.S. Navy veteran. He says immigrants are an asset to the military.
There are people that have expertise and knowledge, language skills, other kinds of things that maybe you don't get. You get what you get in terms of volunteers for an all-volunteer force, and sometimes we can't, from U.S. citizens, recruit all the people that we need.
The bill was introduced last year and hasn't made it out of committee. Advocates now see an opportunity with Donald Trump in the White House and Republicans controlling the House and Senate. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
San Diego County held a grand opening for its newest Immigration and Refugee Welcome Center this week. It's a hub to connect new immigrants and refugees to vital resources and services. KPBS North County reporter Alexander Nguyen got a look inside.
This is the county's second Immigrant and Refugee Welcome Center. The first one was opened in National City in 2023. Since then, the County Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs held various listening sessions in the community to determine where the next one should be. Barbara Jimenez is the Community Operations Officer for the County Health and Human Services Agency.
We heard that North County really wanted the opportunity to have a welcome center here. So this is really created to be a welcoming environment for our families in the community.
Nearly 64% of the county's foreign-born residents live in North County. Jimenez says the center was created to bridge the resources and services gap. Workers here are trained to have a holistic approach to providing care.
And they'll kind of just want to be able to get to know the person, see what the needs might be. Is it something connected to housing? Is it something connected to legal services? You know, what are the different needs? Answer their questions.
She says it takes about 2 to 3 visits before someone becomes comfortable enough to ask for help connecting to services. Services such as employment, Medi-Cal, and CalFresh. The Welcome Center is inside the county's North Inland Live Well Center, putting all services in one location. Inside, there's a children's area with books and activities to keep kids occupied and extra desks for community groups and organizations. In addition to the resources and services provided here, the Welcome Centers also connects immigrants to partners such as the Mexican Consulate and the County Department of Education for things such as paperwork or to enroll their children into school.
We will be having a table here for information every month.
Alicia Curbapalma is San Diego's Consul General of Mexico. She says the consulate will work closely with the Welcome Center to help immigrants from Mexico.
That if they have any doubt or any concern about the situation, that they can come to the consulate. We have plenty of programs and services to provide them. Especially legal assistance can be provided totally free for our nationals.
This is a safe place to ask for those resources, and then getting families connected to those community partners that are providing that specialized, services.
The center costs about $300,000 a year to operate and is open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
A lot of people are planning to visit the annual December Nights event this weekend at Balboa Park, and MTS is offering extra service. Saturday might be the busiest day, with the holiday festival open from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Free shuttle rides operated by MTS will be available. The shuttles leave from Park Boulevard near the City College Transit Center. For more details on public transit to December Nights, you can go to sdmts.com. And speaking of the holidays, be sure to check out the KPBS Holiday Gift Guide. You'll find books, food, music, gardening, and other ideas featuring local businesses, artists, and restaurants. And many of the ideas come from us, the KPBS staff, and you, our audience. Look for the KPBS Holiday Gift Guide at kpbs.org. And now we have a story from Oceanside and the battle against sand erosion on the coastline. The city has narrowed down a location for a pilot project designed by an Australian firm. Tanya Thorne tells us where and when the project will take place.
The majority of Oceanside's coastline is in need of sand. So when it came to figuring out where to pilot the city's Re-Beach Sand Retention Project, staff had plenty of options.
So we took the most eroded areas of the shoreline and divided them up into different segments.
Jamie Timberlake is Oceanside's Coastal Zone Administrator. She says different data analysis and outreach helped reach a decision to begin at Tyson Street Park.
From here, we'll be extending the project on down to Wisconsin Avenue. And between Wisconsin Avenue and Tyson Street Park, we'll be developing an artificial reef offshore with the two headlands situated at Tyson Street and Wisconsin Avenue.
The headland and artificial reef design came from the Australian International Coastal Management Team.
The artificial headlands really they act like headlands or points. And so those structures will actually work just like a point in retaining some of the sand basically out to the extent that they are constructed. And then the artificial reef, it's just looking to slow down some of that, the currents that take the sand off our shoreline. In Oceanside, our shoreline's so straight, and we have none of these natural features that help us retain sand naturally.
The design is often referred to as the living speed bumps concept and is already implemented on Australia's Gold Coast. Timberlake hopes it will also be successful in Oceanside.
We want to test it, make sure it works, and make sure it's meeting all of its performance goals. And then we can start to think about how to replicate it and maybe do it in other locations.
There was some pushback over the project's potential impact on the environment and surf.
And also, it's an emotionally charged topic, right? You know, how is this going to affect my surf? Hey, I surf here. I don't want it to negatively impact my surf. Hey, I walk the beach. I want to be able to, transit the beach.
Bob Ashton is the president of Save Oceanside Sand. He says the nonprofit will help educate the community while holding the city accountable for any impacts the project may have.
If it shows the surf's been negatively impacted, well, we should modify the design, or we should do something to restore the surf back to where it is.
The city will keep an eye on the impact to the surf by collecting data before and after the reef and headlands are installed. For the next year, the design will need to be refined, permitted, and funded. Construction is estimated to start at the end of 2026 or early 2027 and cost $31 million. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
And that story was one of our most popular this week at kpbs.org. Here are some of the others. The city of San Diego faces budget cuts and a hiring freeze after voters reject a tax measure. 5 things to know about December Nights at Balboa Park this weekend. And the Kaiser mental health workers strike leaves some patients struggling for care. Here is that story from KPBS health reporter Heidi DeMarco.
Savannah Pfeiffer, Alana Molino, and Christina Jones became friends at a Kaiser intensive outpatient program. All 3 say the strike has made it harder to access mental health care.
It's hard enough trying to even admit that you need therapy or you need antidepressants on a regular basis. It's hard to admit that to yourself. It's hard to admit it to someone else. And it's hard to go through the trauma with a therapist, a stranger, in order to get that.
Alana Molino is a history teacher. She says it's difficult restarting therapy with temporary providers.
And because they're on strike, we're seeing different therapists. And you have to start pretty much from scratch with a new therapist. And uncover all of the trauma again that you've just worked out with someone else.
As a school mental health caseworker, Savannah Pfeiffer empathizes with the strikers.
But at the same time, it's like, what about us? Like, we got forgotten and left, hung out to dry, basically.
Pfeiffer says before the strike, it took about 3 weeks to get an appointment, but now it's longer.
4 months for a psychiatry appointment is not okay, and the psychiatrists aren't even on strike. So
a Kaiser spokesperson disputes the 4-month wait. They say they've scheduled more than 235,000 appointments for members since October 21st. The state requires HMOs to provide a non-urgent mental health appointment within 10 days of the request. But Pfeiffer says she's filed 2 complaints since the strike began.
Just trying to get adequate care and get, treated like a human being and get seen in a timely manner and have some continuity of care. But
Christina Jones is a community organizer. She says it was tough when the social workers running the outpatient program were replaced.
But when they left, the type of care that we received after, it was so subpar and raggedy.
Kaiser says temporary staff are qualified providers, but the union argues they might not have specialized training. Kaiser also says crisis clinicians are available 24/7 to all patients with urgent cases. But Jones had a negative experience.
I let the person know I was having an emergency, and they were like, "You don't sound like you are, though." And so I was like, "Oh, girl, hold on." I was like, so it's this whole performance and telling your story to stranger after stranger in this system that says that it cares.
Despite the challenges, the 3 women say they found support in each other.
Yeah, it's like a glimmer of light in this darkness, because there are other people who have mental health issues and we aren't the only ones.
As the strike continues, they're looking at other health insurance options, including paying for therapy out of pocket. In the interest of disclosure, Kaiser Permanente is a KPBS underwriter. Heidi DeMarco, KPBS News. Judicial reform is a hot topic in Mexico these days, and most recently Mexico announced plans to stop appointing federal judges and have them be elected. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis says a University of San Diego Law School program will play a key role in training the new judges.
Usted le ha dado lujos a su esposa.
You are listening to a mock trial at the University of San Diego School of Law. Right now, a lawyer is cross-examining a witness.
Lo que usted le pagó clases.
Now, this lecture hall isn't filled with your typical students. Instead, they're all Mexican judges visiting San Diego for a week-long legal seminar. USD has offered workshops to lawyers and judges from Latin America for years now. Karen Sigmund is the Assistant Dean of International Programs. She says that legal professionals often need training whenever their home countries enact significant changes to their judicial systems.
For example, in Chile 30 plus years ago, they started with oral trials because of everything that the country was going through. Soon after, Argentina started with oral trials. Mexico started to look at what was happening in the rest of Latin America and looking north at what we were doing and what other models were doing.
Before switching to oral trials like the ones we have in the US, those Latin American countries often used written trials.
Everything is done through documents, through petitions, through paperwork. The person in a trial does not really see the judge. They just read a file and make a determination.
That shift has come to Mexico, which is why these state judges from Baja California are visiting San Diego. But there's an even bigger change on the horizon for Mexico's judicial system. Earlier this year, then-President Andrés Manuel López Obrador introduced a series of controversial reforms. Among other things, they make the job of a federal judge an elected position.
Para que los jueces, magistrados y ministros del Poder Judicial sean electos por el pueblo.
Supporters say the reforms increase transparency, but opponents believe that they could erode the independence of Mexico's federal court. State Judge Salvador Juan Ortiz Morales has a philosophical view of the reforms.
Para mí los cambios son inevitables, es parte de la vida y son retos.
Change is an inevitable part of life, he says. But this specific change comes with big challenges. Now, as a state judge, Ortiz Morales is not directly impacted by the federal reforms, but he believes that Baja California and other Mexican states will follow suit.
Creíamos que era una forma en que se había logrado una estabilidad.
He's worried about the lack of job stability that comes with elections. And given that uncertainty, he wonders whether Mexico's best and brightest young lawyers would even want to invest the decades of work required to become a federal judge.
El tope máximo para la implementación es el...
Ana Carolina Valencia Márquez is another participant. She says the judicial reforms will have a huge impact.
Hay que aceptar los efectos de los acontecimientos.
She says that judges will need to accept the changes. And USD is ready to help. Again, here is Sigmund.
USD is uniquely positioned because of our expertise, because of language, because of geography, and most importantly, because we have friends in Mexico, and we believe that this is a learning process for them. It's a learning process for us.
She says staff is already coming up with workshops that specifically address the federal judicial reforms. Training could include insight from California judges who are already used to running for re-election. But for now, they're focused on helping the current transition from written to oral trials in the state legal system. Valencia Márquez says the change has been daunting but worthwhile.
Suena simple, pero es un cambio de 360 grados.
She believes they will make the system much more transparent. A welcome change. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
And just a reminder, KPBS is on YouTube and you can find all of our video content right there. Subscribe and get notified when new content is posted. YouTube is also where we live stream KPBS Evening Edition weeknights at 5. We hope that you enjoyed this look at KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Thanks for joining us.